Hello and welcome to the very first episode of SymbiCare Dialogues, a conversation on women's well-being, a Symbiosis podcast. Starting with our first season this November, we'll be dropping an episode every 15 days, culminating in a grand finale to commemorate the International Women's Day on March 8, 2026. I'm your host, Dr. Ruchi Kher Jaggi, the Dean of the Faculty of Media and Communication at SIU. And for our curtain raiser, we have with us someone who's been championing the cause and concept of women's well-being particularly and in general pioneering all health and well-being initiatives at Symbiosis. A gynecologist by profession, an academic leader, the very dynamic provost of the Faculty of Medical and Health Sciences at Symbiosis, Dr. Rajiv Yeravdekar. Dr. Rajiv, welcome to this podcast.
Thank you, Ruchi, for having me over. It's a pleasure, rather a delight, to initiate this dialogue on well-being beyond health and especially attempting to unravel the myriad dimensions of feminine well-being. Professionally, being a gynecologist, and the fact that today we are operational in a multidimensional, multi-stakeholder ecosystem of Symbiosis International University, which professes to be a health-promoting university, there couldn't be anything more gratifying. Thank you indeed for having me over.
So, Dr. Rajiv, when you talk about women's well being and not just women's health, what exactly do you mean by that? How do you see the framework of well being being broader or being different from just health?
Well, I'm glad that you have struck to the genesis of well-being evolving from health. Yes, in 1970, the WHO did define health as a state of physical, mental, social, and spiritual well-being, and went on to add this suffix of not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So, if you split this word disease, it is dis and ease, lack of ease. So, anyone who is not at ease is diseased, and anyone who is at ease, so as to say in today's lingo, in his or her zone, is at ease. But well-being is more all-encompassing, and at Symbiosis, we attempt to include all these dimensions. So, physical well-being would include nutritional literacy, it would include mental health literacy, emotional stability, spiritual connectedness, the dimension of vocational stability leading to a financial stability, and from that financial literacy contributing to a social connectedness, legal literacy, being aware of her rights and responsibilities, digital responsibility, and environmental responsibility. All these varied, multi constructed dimensions of well being come into place. So, well being is more holistic, more umbrella, rather than one individual spoke of the entire wheel of wellness.
So then can we say something like that if health is a chapter, then well-being is the whole book?
Spot on.
All right, great. As a medical practitioner with almost 4 decades of experience, I'm sure you've encountered countless stories. Is there anyone that has particularly stayed with you? Something that inspired you to think about spearheading these conversations, larger conversations around women's well-being?
Yeah, in this transition of over 40 years from a young budding gynecologist way back in the early 90s to today, what I am, there has been a paradigm shift in my understanding. And I would probably not address or rather treat a woman the same way as I would have probably treated her in the early 90s. Back in the early 90s or the early 2000s, I would treat a lady purely from a clinical perspective of a gynecologist. Today, from the wider lens of a public health perspective, my approach would essentially be based on clinical dimension, but would have a more holistic understanding of the problem at large. Just to put it in right perspective and quote one distinct example of one lady whom I was treating for almost a few years, 5 or 6 years, on reproductive tract infections. And she used to come to me recurrently. Her husband would be visiting various places from where he would probably get or be the source of infection. And this lady I was treating month end, year end on for her recurrent reproductive tract infections with antibiotics and all the other, what we call in medical jargon, with the routine masala. I never addressed the social fabric which led to the recurrence of these infections, never educated this lady about her marital rights, legal rights, never prompted her or cajoled her to engage in some sort of financial literacy initiatives which would make her financially more empowered to question her husband, and various other dimensions by which she used to stay at home, not seeking vocational opportunities which would give her that societal status on which she could justifiably, if not argue, at least discuss with her partner. So, the approach today vis-a-vis the approach a couple of decades back, there is a myriad and a distinct change in my understanding of feminine well-being issues rather than feminine health issues alone.
You often voice and champion your perspectives regarding women's well being on many forums. Please explain it medically, but also sociologically.
Perhaps down the lane, 40 years of professional practice as a gynecologist, and more recently, as I said, wearing a public health perspective or a public health hat, I would like to split it up into two dimensions: feminine and well being. Well being is something which I have elaborated abundantly. But feminine is something which I would like to comment, because today, conventionally, women are looked at from a medical perspective into three phases of their lives. One is the prepubertal, where issues of body image, hormonal issues, diet, food fat, etc. are addressed. The second one is the reproductive phase, where the women are delivering children. Probably the most pampered, most favored phase of a woman's life. All welfare measures, both in the public and the private sector, are concentrated on this phase of a woman's life. And all love and affection by the family members, including the community, are focused on this aspect or this phase of a woman's life. And the third phase is the postmenopausal phase, which, according to me personally, is the most neglected phase. And from a medical perspective purely, in fact, this is the time when the women require the maximum medical attention, with rising incidence or prevalence of medical disorders.
Right.
But unfortunately, women today are segregated in these three zones or phases of a life, which individually and in my personal opinion, I do not appreciate at all. This approach, I feel, is very reductionist and a retrogressive approach rather than a progressive approach. In today's world, when we're talking of women empowerment, this is something which is, to the least said, dispensed and needs to be condemned.
Right. And I think that brings me to my next question. I think that flows seamlessly into this conversation. Women or woman is not a rigid or a fixed category, and you said it like in such clear ways. Being a woman means different kinds of things to different women, right? How do we not look at women's well-being only from the lens of reproductive health, something that you have touched upon, but yeah, I mean, if you can take it further. And how does this conversation on women's well-being that we are having right now include women who have chosen, let's say, not to have children, or women who haven't been able to, because their journeys and challenges are equally real, just often less spoken about?
Absolutely. So today's concept and understanding in most quarters of society is feminine health, feminine well-being, motherhood, reproductive potential. And there are, as you rightly said, women who can't conceive, who choose not to conceive, and who choose to delink femininity from their reproductive performance.
Right.
And they are absolutely right, well within their rights as women to have a representation and identity beyond reproductive performance. And this is exactly the conversation which we are trying to forge in various quarters, various sections of society, of looking at women from a social security point of view, from a legal security point of view, from a financial security point of view, from making women as change agents of promoting digital literacy, of promoting environmental sustainability, and much more.
Yeah. So that's the spectrum, right?
Absolutely.
Well, your views really seem to echo what we hear in many government and public health campaigns, as well as civil society movements. How do you see your work connecting with these larger efforts?
Yeah, from a sustainable and a scalable point of view, your initiatives have to be aligned with that of the government. And I'm delighted that both the government at the center as well as the state have launched this initiative of women empowerment through women's health. My only point of interjection is look at women's health from a women's well-being perspective based on the dimensions which I've shared. And it is through these initiatives or initiatives like this podcast whereby we are planning to reach out to a larger, wider audience, to the community, not only regionally, nationally, but even globally.
So, when you think about this podcast and the larger dialogue it hopes to spark, what would you say are its key objectives and outcomes?
Yes, in a university ecosystem, Ruchi, we are familiar with the term of learning objectives. So, obviously, any initiative has to have well defined aims and objectives. And to put it probably succinctly and in a more capsular format, we would aim to redefine health as a complete well being concept, provide a platform to educate, engage, and empower not only women, men, but communities at large on this multidimensional aspect of well being, strengthen SIU's identity as a health promoting university, health promoting organization, spreading their mandate from beyond campus to include communities to global platforms, and probably position SIU as a thought leader in global conversations on multidimensional well being. Through the podcast series, leveraging the advantage of digital literacy, we want to make it more scalable, going from beyond campus to communities, as I said, and promoting it as a platform for health and well being advocacy. And finally, as I said, promote alignment with regional, national agendas, the UN sustainability goals, and the broader agenda of feminine well being. Exciting opportunities for collaborations do exist. Get people who are like minded in their understanding of feminine well being on a common platform and use them, their level of expertise, experience to bring about a change in society. Simple.
Wow, wow. So, I think it'll be very nice if you can tell our listeners what's in store for season one. What kind of stories and voices are you bringing together? Can you walk the audience through this?
Sure, Ruchi, in today's OTT world, we talk about dropping an episode. And obviously, considering the myriad dimensions of feminine well being, which we talked about in the last few minutes, we would be obviously starting with feminine health,
Mhm.
talking about nutritional literacy, emotional stability, the physical dimensions of health, going on to financial literacy or financial well being, social connectedness, spiritual well being, legal well being, understanding the rights of a woman, the provisions in the law which promote her legal safety, an orientation to digital well being, the digital detox, which is much the need of the hour today in this young generation specifically, and orientation to environmental sustainability, because as responsible global citizens, every woman or every girl also needs to understand that she has got an environmental responsibility. All this over a span of about 2 to 3 months, as you rightly mentioned, would help us and communities to understand where we are looking at women in the 21st century.
So, there would be like different guests coming in.
Yeah, so the objective is to get an in house expert
Mhm.
from the Symbiosis family, talk or engage with a lady of substance, a lady who epitomizes that particular dimension of well-being, and understand her journey, her perspective, her concept, and what she would like to tell a larger global audience.
And these will be all professional experts.
All
right?
professionally done. The goal is simple: practical, inclusive conversations for men, for women, and communities at large.
This has been a very, very interesting conversation. So, as we wrap up, what's that one thought or message you would want listeners to take away from this conversation?
Simple: understand feminine well being holistically beyond the lens of health alone. Well being is not a gender issue, it's a human issue.
Yeah.
It impacts communities.
Beautifully said. That was very profound, Dr. Rajiv. And thank you so much. This was a very inspiring conversation. I'm really looking forward to what lies ahead on this podcast. And to our listeners, this is just the first episode of SymbiCare Dialogues, Conversations on Women's Well-Being. We will be on many platforms, including YouTube, Spotify. So stay tuned as we dive deeper into every dimension of well being in the coming few weeks. And until then, I'll just say live well, think well, and be well. Thank you so much.